Andy the Goose became a symbol of resilience and inspiration in the 1980s. Born without feet, Andy's chances of survival were slim. However, Gene Fleming, a kind-hearted inventor from Hastings, Nebraska, took Andy under his wing. Fleming crafted special prosthetic shoes that allowed Andy to walk, swim, and lead a relatively normal life. Tragically, in 1991, Andy was found dead, a victim of a brutal attack. His body was discovered without his prosthetic shoes, leading to public outrage and sadness. The perpetrator was never identified, and the senseless killing of Andy remains a dark and sorrowful chapter in his otherwise inspiring story.
In 1985, renowned primatologist Dian Fossey was found murdered in her cabin in Rwanda's Volcanoes National Park. Fossey, famous for her groundbreaking work with mountain gorillas, was discovered on December 27th with a fatal head wound, apparently inflicted by a machete. Fossey had been in conflict with poachers and local villagers over her aggressive anti-poaching efforts, leading to numerous threats. Her research and advocacy had made significant enemies among those who profited from gorilla poaching and habitat destruction. Despite a thorough investigation, no one was ever definitively charged with her murder.
In 1964, Lewis Allen, a 44-year-old African-American logger and civil rights activist in Liberty, Mississippi, was brutally murdered. He was shot twice outside his home. Allen had faced significant harassment due to his activism for voter registration and civil rights. He had witnessed the murder of fellow activist Herbert Lee by a white state legislator and was pressured to stay silent. Despite threats, Allen stood by his testimony, making him a target. Although there were clear motives and suspects, including local law enforcement, the case was never properly investigated and no one was charged. The murder of Louis Allen remains an unresolved chapter in the struggle for justice and equality in America.
In 2001, shortly after 9/11, the United States faced another threat: anthrax-laced letters. Between September and November, letters containing anthrax spores were sent to media outlets and government offices, including the offices of senators. The attacks resulted in 5 deaths and 17 infections, affecting postal workers, journalists, and others who came into contact with the contaminated mail. The FBI identified Dr. Bruce Ivins, a scientist at the U.S. Army Medical Research Institute of Infectious Diseases, as the prime suspect in 2008. Ivins died before he could be charged, leaving many questions unanswered.
In 1979, the body of a young girl was found in a cornfield in Caledonia, New York. She had been shot twice and left without identification. For decades, she was known only as the Caledonia Jane Doe. Despite extensive efforts by law enforcement, her identity and the circumstances of her death remained a mystery. In 2015, advancements in DNA technology led to a breakthrough. The girl was identified as Tammy Jo Alexander, a 16-year-old who had gone missing from Brooksville, Florida, in 1979. Her family had reported her missing, but the connection to the unidentified body in New York had not been made. Despite solving the mystery of her identity, the investigation into who killed Tammy Alexander remains open.
In 1983, Emanuela Orlandi, a Vatican City resident and the daughter of a Vatican employee, disappeared under mysterious circumstances. On June 22nd, Emanuela went to a music lesson in Rome, but never returned home. Her disappearance quickly became one of Italy's most intriguing and controversial mysteries. Numerous theories have surfaced over the years, including links to the mafia. Despite various leads and extensive investigations, no conclusive evidence has been found to explain what happened to Emanuela.
In 2005, Geetha Angara, a 43-year-old chemist and mother of 3, was found dead at the Passaic Valley Water Commission treatment plant in Totowa, New Jersey, where she worked. On February 8th, after being reported missing by her colleagues, her body was discovered in a water tank. Despite an extensive investigation, no conclusive evidence has been found to identify her killer. Suspicion fell on her co-workers, but there was insufficient proof to charge anyone. The case has drawn significant media attention, and various theories have been proposed, including workplace disputes and personal grudges, but the murder remains unsolved. In 1999, 3-year-old Jared Adadero disappeared while hiking with a group in the Colorado mountains. Jared was part of a Christian singles group led by his father, Alan Atadero, and went missing near the Big South Trail in the Roosevelt National Forest on October 2nd. Despite extensive search efforts involving hundreds of volunteers, no trace of Jared was found initially. 4 years later, in 2003, hikers discovered his remains and clothing several miles from where he was last seen. The condition of his clothes and the location raised many questions. The cause of death was undetermined, with theories ranging from animal attack to abduction and foul play. The mysterious circumstances continue to haunt his family and the community. In 1981, Ken McElroy, a notorious bully and criminal in the small town of Skidmore, Missouri, was shot to death in broad daylight. McElroy had terrorized the town for years with theft, assault, and intimidation, managing to avoid serious jail time through legal maneuvers and witness intimidation. On July 10, 1981, after attending a court hearing, McElroy was shot multiple times while sitting in his truck. Despite the presence of dozens of witnesses, no one came forward to identify the shooter. The townspeople, fed up with McElroy's reign of terror, maintained a wall of silence. The investigation yielded no arrests, and McElroy's murder remains officially unsolved. In 1940, Dr. Lewis B. Allen, a prominent chemist and food safety expert, was found murdered in his home in Westfield, Massachusetts. Allen, known for his work in exposing food adulteration and advocating for pure food laws, had many enemies in the food industry. On May 7th, he was found having suffered a fatal attack with a heavy object. Despite an extensive investigation, the killer was never identified, and the motive remains unclear. Some speculated that his murder was linked to his efforts to expose unethical practices in the food industry. His murder remains one of the enduring unsolved cases in Massachusetts. In 1973, Colonel Yosef Alon, an Israeli Air Force pilot and military attaché in Washington, D.C., was assassinated outside his home in Chevy Chase, Maryland. On the night of July 1st, Alon and his wife returned home from a social event. As he exited his car, he was shot multiple times by an unknown assailant and later died in the hospital. Despite a thorough investigation by the FBI and Israeli authorities, the case remains unsolved. Various theories have been proposed, including the involvement of Palestinian militants or other political adversaries, but no concrete evidence has surfaced.
In 1969, Sister Kathy Sesnick, a 26-year-old nun and teacher at Archbishop Keough High School in Baltimore, Maryland, disappeared. She was last seen on November 7th, leaving her apartment to run errands. Her body was found 2 months later in a remote area. Years later, allegations emerged linking her murder to a cover-up of sexual abuse at the high school. Former students claimed that Father Joseph Maskell, the school chaplain, had been engaging in inappropriate conduct with them, and that Sister Kathy had discovered this. They believed she was killed to keep her silent. Despite investigations and numerous leads, no one has been charged with her murder.
On February 21, 1965, Malcolm X, a prominent civil rights leader, was assassinated while preparing to speak at the Audubon Ballroom in New York City. As he began his address, 3 gunmen opened fire, hitting him multiple times. Malcolm X was pronounced dead shortly after, at the age of 39. The assailants were identified as members of the Nation of Islam, from which Malcolm X had recently broken away. 3 men were convicted of the murder, though controversy and theories about the true masterminds behind the assassination persist.
In 1982, 12-year-old Johnny Gosch disappeared while delivering newspapers in West Des Moines, Iowa. Early on the morning of September 5th, Johnny left home for his paper route, but never returned. His red wagon, filled with undelivered newspapers, was found abandoned a few blocks from his home. Despite extensive searches and investigations, no trace of Johnny was ever found. Witnesses reported seeing a man in a blue car talking to Johnny, but leads quickly went cold. The case gained national attention and spurred numerous theories. Johnny's mother, Noreen Gosch, became an outspoken advocate for missing children, pushing for changes in laws and awareness.
In the early 1960s, the brutal murder of the Aguechi brothers, Alberto and Vito, shocked the criminal underworld and law enforcement in Toronto, Canada. Alberto Aguechi was a small-time criminal involved in drug trafficking. In October 1961, he went missing, and his body was found in a suitcase a month later. His brother Vito, who was also involved in organized crime, disappeared around the same time. Vito's body was never found, leading to speculation that he met a similar fate. The gruesome nature of Alberto's murder suggested it was a mafia hit, intended as a warning to others. Despite investigations and the notorious reputation of their criminal connections, the murders of the Agueci brothers remain unsolved.